because I recently published 2 books. One is 26.2 poems about running, and for the non-runners, 26.2 is the distance of a marathon. You're smart if you don't know what that means. And the other one is Fishing with Hildegard. And so I sort of had one idea about how I might go about this reading, and reading from one, and then reading some junk in the middle, and then reading the other book. But 2 days ago, I threw that all out, and now all I can say for sure is that the first poem is going to be about crows, and the last poem is going to be about crows, and there might be some crows in the middle. How's that? Is that introduction going to work? Okay, good. Thank you. All right, cool. All right, so it works for me. So, Crow Smart. This is a poem about going through a very difficult time and then gaining some hope. So, Crow Smart. A murder of crows infiltrated my brain. Not my thoughts, I mean really, in my head. Cawing away to each other in a savage fever pitch. Only when they flap their wings do I get relief. A small clearing in a tangle of woods. Yesterday when I looked outside, crows punctuated the tree, their beaks whirring at yet unfurled buds. A corvid plan, I thought, to reduce shade. These bright black birds bring not umbrage, but illuminate this day. Their busy black heads with swift beaks solve for me the darkest part that once obscured a beating heart. New York, having a really kind of horrible, I'm a technical trainer, and I had a really bad trip. It was a really so anyways, I kind of wanted to go into New York and get drunk, that's kind of the way I felt. But what I really realized in this poem is that I needed a cup of humanity. That's what I needed. Port. From the time-lapsed beehive of the Port Authority bus terminal, we are swept into 8th Avenue. Eddies of beautiful human faces, bodies swirling in thickly exhaustive air. The volume of Niagara. Yellow taxis punctuate the picture. I lose my breath in the torrent, then dive into the current and make it an extension of myself. The electricity of humanity with every tongue, an array of beauty, animal spirit pulsing. I am charged and walk faster through the crowd. My hunger is gone, and I'm nourished by my fellows in the throng. Washed up to the edge of Central Park, I dip in. Its coolness takes me. Birds sing to me. Lush green trees bathe me, again fed by living energy. I navigate back through crowded streets to find my returning bus. At port, I rest, bobbing slowly, head and body nudging softly against the berth. I depart. I was reading a lot of the Spanish kind of surrealist poets, very much into Lorca, and so I was kind of captured with the idea of duende, which in Spanish can mean goblin or demon or spirit. It can also mean magnetism, but I just wanted to read something that Lorca says about what duende is. The duende then is a power, not a work. It is a struggle, not a thought. I've heard an old maestro of the guitar say, the duende is not in the throat. The duende climbs up inside of you from the soles of your feet. Meaning this, it is not a question of ability, but of true living style, of blood, of the most ancient culture of spontaneous creation. So, in the thickest bog of Tijuana, a street clenched by chewed leaves, a meager kitchen lit by moths, chorizo and cool tecates, Tomas brought out his guitar. Wood rubbed smooth by a patina of locusts, his thick fingers evoked blue horses. From his mouth, bright birds. No, from his mouth, bright moths and the geometry of birds. Tomas and his guitar were tuned to the lust of subterranean beetles, to the wind scraping its nails along the sidewalk. The plumage of his heart made ours set sail. We blew backward into the night and fell shattered before the moon. Pheidippides. Few runners think of Pheidippides, our seminal soldier marathoner who in 490 BCE, after fighting in battle, ran from Marathon to Athens in skinny sandals, proclaiming Nike's victory, only to collapse into death without a single sip of Gatorade. And why do we think of Pheidippides? And why should we think of Pheidippides? We don't run a marathon as a swan song before we slip into the cool gray grave. But he's my hero. He did it. No t-shirt, no corporate sponsor. He crossed the land, fueled by valor, by the blushing pride of victory, and an unabashed sense of purpose. All right. So I'm going to stay on the hero theme. As a runner, I ran in high school, and at that time, like Frank Shorter was big, and so I was a Frank Shorter fan, and people like Shailene Flanagan and Kara Gauscher are beasties as I can't say his name right now because my tongue is okay. Gebre Selassie. Anyways, you know who he is. If you're a runner, you know who he is. Anyways, but these are gods. These aren't like real people. They run in ways that we can only imagine. So anyways, maybe because I grew up in a working class union family, I like the underdogs more than the real. So anyways, my heroes. My heroes are not the obvious, well-tanned, svelte and rope-topped, muscled, pumping like the Industrial Revolution, but the unsung, wide, heavy, oak-bottomed, and moving like a tanker. A yard of sweat soaking through a tent of fabric, breath steaming, cheeks blossoming like a paprika chicken. The eyes, bold, angry, bewildered, embarrassed, defiant, fisting, amused, serene, convinced, resolved, eyes rolling, wondering, and settling in to the path ahead. Giant steps. So, 99 specifically, all that pent-up sexual energy will definitely improve your mile time. So, all right, that's my recommendation. All right, so I'm going to move on to another running poem, and this is called "The Architectural Wonder of My Feet." I'm going to quickly do this first. You may boast the beauty of the Taj Mahal, or be struck dumb by the great pyramids of Giza, with pharaohs performing the machinations of dreamtime with Osiris. Be tickled by the swaying Millennium Bridge in London, with or without the Death Eaters. Express wonderment for the verdant Agora Gardens in Taipei with its luscious architecture. But I'm in love with the architecture of my feet. The arches that triumph with sublime mechanics tied to calf muscles allow me to spring up and propel into the air, across the earth with guileless glee. Return me to terra firma, bracing my impact more gracefully than Elon Musk's rocket boosters return to our planet. My feet performed this miracle more than 40,000 times, running 26.2 miles. Or when did a year ago, it would mark the 50th anniversary, Richard Brodigan's of trout fishing in America, and I sort of thought, oh, I want to when I was a young puppy, I really loved Brodigan. And so I felt like I kind of wanted to do my own thing. So that's somewhat where it came from. Hildegard she's dead. She's been dead for a long time. She was a 12th century mystic. She was a musician, she was a poet, a playwright, a scholar, a feminist, a physician, and a healer. She was all kinds of things. For me though, she just believed in the spirit of living things. She kept a keen eye on nature. She wrote about all kinds of things. And she considered herself a vessel of the divine. So that's sort of my inlet. I kind of want to do that. Not that I feel like I'm a vessel of the divine, but that idea, and trying to capture that with my love of nature, my love of fishing, and so I will start reading that. All right, so the first one I'm going to read is called Hildegard's Orb and the Trout. My first encounter with Hildegard was in a Michigan swamp. The wet leather, bubbling croak, lathering leopard frogs, cicadas pulled the landscape into a knot. Steam and darkness rose out of the quagmire, pulled by a dray of insects, pulsing low, scraping high. Night trickled till the pop of fireflies consumed me. One hovered close and became an orb. Within, a minnowy, illuminated woman, blue, knotted, radiant, speaking the language of the swamp, pulsing like a firefly, song of the tree fly, song of the tree frog, eyes of a fly, and a woman's well deep eyes at once. Everything went void silent. In the air above me, caddisfly patterns appeared. Then a trout, IMAX theater size, mouthed a fly gingerly. I thought, raise the rod tip skyward, set the hook. Hildegard's orb extinguished. The only sound was vapor leaving my mouth. About being a poet in a way. This is called No Birds. At a very young age, Hildegard saw things. Mighty, fantastic, terrible, beautiful, mystifying. She heard the songs of birds or angels, sounds that lit up the orchard with no birds present. A glimpse of the green man or wood sprite must have seemed normal. Young poets can see sounds, taste color, horripilate in the ecstatic presence of nature. She once described with complete accuracy the spotted markings of an unborn mare, to the astonishment of her parents, who looked upon their daughter with different eyes once it foaled, and they too could see the mare. The kaleidoscope of senses received by Hildegard terrified her when she learned that no one else saw them, heard them, or felt them. She tucked them away as a young poet might do, feeling like an albatross among weary sailors in a dead calm. Okay, First wander into the woods, I knew there was a green man. Where light flickers through trees, ferns nod and fan along a brook's trickle. When glimpsed, he turns sideways, disappears. A hummingbird plucks a sultry to cover his stealthy escape. Within a frog throttle, he winks into coarse, papery grass. Narcissus flowers bow as the green man passes. I cast my line as a caddisfly curls like a lover's tongue. I catch a quick glimpse of the half-tree, half-man before the trout takes the fly, and all is fish, muscle, water, finesse. A wee dance the green man lives for, always near, forever alone. All right, let's go back to running. So, this is called As a Boy I Ran Everywhere, and I think about when I was a kid, I feel like that's all I ever did. Running around, running away from things, getting in trouble running away, or stuff like that. Here it is. As a boy, I ran everywhere. As a boy, I ran everywhere. Around the corner, over fences, down dog-snapping alleys, kicking over metal garbage cans, sprinting to the next block, jumping off porches and speeding over hedges after ringing the doorbells of grumpy old neighbors. Tag, always. In the red-faced, sweating, mosquito-slapping dusk, more frenzied running, as streetlights flickered on and sticky, wet calling from humid cinder porches, a musical, "Come in now," bleats in the dusk, bolting to the dark end of the street, pretending not to hear, then surrender to our houses, yellow light leaking onto our lawns. It's got important business. Yellow light leaking onto lawns, black and white television in the corner, colonial furniture, cat fur carpet, shortbread and milk. Then sink into the bath, pretending to snorkel, turning the knob, broiling my ankles, hot water, running. Right. Running from a girl. Hey, I was in first grade. Second grade was different. Running from a girl in the first grade. A mayhem of bodies like Mardi Gras filled the playground, dodging in and out, around the seesaw, between the monkey bars, kicking chalk on the hopscotch board, the air electric chaotic with pealing laughter and hyena screams. I head for the tunnel, the painted cement sewer pipe. I ducked, but not enough. Hit the tunnel with the top of my head, my cry weirdly echoing in the cylinder, sweat dripping down my freckled forehead. I plant my palm, wipe my sweat, and come back with a red smear. The red dripped into my eyes. Curious kids crowded around me, their faces painted in alarm. I held a wad of gauze to my head while the principal drove to pick up my mom to take me to the clinic. She was wearing a finely cut houndstooth suit, not the jellyfish housecoat I would have expected. Among the smell of ether and high ping of metal tools and metal plates, the doctor stitched my head. In my cheek, a grape Tootsie Pop, unlicked, unbitten, numbing my gums while the wound was sewn. Under the hot lamps, the tugging of flesh. I dreamed of being free, running through a field of pulsing dandelions. Grounded. Hi. Thanks for coming. Grounded. Slide. To fall from grace is common. To fall from a high playground slide is extraordinary. Not merely for the sensation, but for the pain, the attention, and the multiple minted faces stamped in alarm, trying to register the out-of-place bone, pushing to break through the confines of my skin. I was 5, in shock, but sucked into the attention, as though I had put my flat-topped head into the mouth of a lion. Perhaps I had. My aunt found magazines in her apartment across from the Toronto City Park, where I dropped from the sky onto my left elbow. She wrapped my arm in an issue of Life and taped it in place. The taxi blurred to the hospital, and I into a poppy dream. Tower. In the heady bloom of a Michigan spring, we loaded into a car with Chris. With beer and electricity. I was headed for Europe in a couple of days, but for now, we set sail for what the night would bring. Among oaths and mad soliloquies, we ended up on a high hill, daring and ranting, and before long, climbing up a radio tower. Too impossibly high to look down. My crazed eyes swept the landscape. The milky partial light of the moon was eerie and just unreal enough not to cause panic. But as I passed the flashing red lights, my head reeled in an interplanetary sweep that convinced me that surely I would die horribly that night. When my rattling knees finally eased me to the spinning earth, I felt once more an unexpected arrival. Burial. The shadow of pelicans skimmed the beach. My child pours sand from a bucket over my legs, packing it down as she works. The familiar comfort of the sand against my flesh, my daughter putting me into the earth. In Warren, Michigan, which is I live between 8 Mile and 9 Mile Road. If you saw the Eminem movie 8 Mile, it's kind of just down the road from it. We would run. So, yeah, anyways. That just gives you a small amount of historical reference. I didn't really know. And I'm okay with that. Okay, running among the dead. In high school, our cross-country team, there was never more than 10 of us, ran into Detroit, along Outer Drive, and into Mount Olivet Cemetery. Low rolling hills, clipped green lawn, the blush of unabashed youth running among the dead. 100 years of interned bodies. Some days we'd lope past a huddle of mourners, weeping, murmuring under heavy gray skies. Once, while veering off the careening blacktop path, we came upon a fresh grave. A vapor of peat and earthworms rising to meet us. A robin eyed us from a headstone, worm in its beak, blinking. Then a scraping caw and a crow burst in and stole the worm. We stood silent, then shook ourselves, fell into a canter, nothing but our breaths and gentle footfall. About him, but I feel that the grief that has taken me has made it very difficult for me to write a whole bunch about him yet. But because I wrote a lot in a short amount of time and then kind of trying to digest it in order to prepare to come here and read, I saw a lot of things coming out. That some things are always in my poetry, but I feel that Chris was with me and informed in some ways. So I find that many of the imagery, a lot of burials and rebirths and things dying and things coming back. And so I'm going to read a couple poems that are about that. The first one is called Fisherwoman Cloistered, and there is this part of the process of when like a nun becomes a cloistered nun. They go through this symbolic burial, among other things, and so this is about that. But the idea is that they are buried and they're dead to one world and then are born to Christ or born to the spirit world and stuff. But because I'm a fisherman, and because so what I've done with this is that instead of her, she's in this burial state. So this poem is from her point of view, and it's about her ultimately becoming a healer and also being a fisherwoman, And so I'm kind of using that. And let's see what happens, shall we? Okay, so this is called Fisherwoman Cloistered. In the shadow-sized depression into the clay, I descend, supine, eyes to the void, to the constellations, to the quiet lizard licking inside my soul, heart, magnetic north, a small bloom of light in the gloaming of a life now buried. Earthen clods weighed upon my breast, dead to one world, this grave a portal. In the hushed cell, the soil speaks the very first language. Armadillium vulgare, or pillbug, makes a rolling passage in the damp earth. Jerusalem crickets, the Navajo call skull insect, beat a rhythmic mating drum they cannot hear, but feel in their legs the way I feel in this ritual burial. Earthworms accordioning their viscous beams through my fingers, born of the viridity of grasses, their heat pulses through my fingers. Cold clay imprints my knuckles. The earthworm, allworm, moves with the verdant sonic vibrations that bring spring, excite the earth to grow, excites the trout. Once I lance it upon my hook, the allworm will talk to the trout in its mesmerizing dance, so that the trout must ingest the worm to pass on the pulsing spirit of spring. Then I will hook the trout, absorb the electric green energy of the worm, of the trout. Then I will pass this on through the healing arts, the light of the fisherwoman. And it's called Resurrection of the Earthworm. Resurrection of the Earthworm. So it was kind of interesting that I realized after I wrote it that it was Easter when I wrote it. So there you have it. Who knows? Resurrection of the Earthworm. Per Hildegard's instruction, I lanced the earthworm efficiently. Wait, I want to do something. I want to change the introduction. So, fishermen are wacko creatures to begin with, right? So, have you ever heard of noodling? All right, road scholars do this. Okay, so there are places where people dive into rivers, not wearing shirts, and stick their arms into holes, and catfish, big catfish, bite the worms, bite the arm. And these road scholars like pull them out and jump up, and then their friends are there waiting with the pickup truck, and they pull them up and take them ashore and take the fish off. This is for real. There's a documentary called Noodling for Flatheads, because anyways, That story was worth it, all right? Okay. There's another thing that people do, and that is, and that's why I needed to change and I had to start over. Okay, so the other thing that they do is, people do, and not nearly as crazy, is take worms and cover them in clay on a hook and throw them, hey Stu, and throw them into the water so that, because when you throw something in the water, the fish get spooked and they run away. But because they cover them with clay, and it takes a while, the fish kind of come back and think everything's kind of cool and normal. And so slowly, the clay disappears and the worm's there, and the fish come get it. So that's the new intro to that poem. Okay. Resurrection of the earthworm. Per Hildegard's instruction, I lanced the earthworm, efficiently, but gingerly enough to keep her alive. Take fresh river clay and create an angler's sepulcher, pressed into my palm, gently cast with a loping toss to keep the worm entombed. Slow click the reel lock, slight slack left in the line. The stream's steady current dissolves the funereal blanket, creating a swirling river banshee of particulate slip in the flexing eddies. The emerging, twisting worm sings to a passing trout, who strikes with ancient instinct, pulls the writhing life to itself. I follow with ancestral reflex and draw toward me a fresh pulse into my heart. Take this quick life. Okay. How many poems I can read today? But this one is Mirror in a Bog, and this is about people who sometimes are sacrificed or for different reasons. Dead bodies are found in places like Ireland and Scotland, fairly preserved in bogs. So. Mirror in the Bogs. The susurrant music of the trees lulled me deeper into the moss-festooned forest. Ladybug beetles expose mechanical wings and lift in a deafening machinery of emotion. Earthworms expand and contract in an accordionic progression that to the mole is a scraping sandpaper shuffle. Moles know moist music, know moist dark movement is best. Avoiding potato bugs is a chess game performed in the dark. Salamanders imitate leaves, and serpentine slithers soundlessly through a moss tumble of stones. In the bog, perfectly intact bodies trick time, smirk through an ancient mirror. We pass briefly above, lightly, ever looking forward, occasionally snap a selfie by the cypress at twilight. That's, I can raise. Your boat. There are boats that are clever folds of paper and sails that glide with a child's breath and delight in the bright parks. Some are crafted for months under a beam into the late hours with measured wood and controlled globs of glue. The oohs and ahs at launch, gloats the boat maker. But such crafts are of no use at sea. Priests make boats that only appear to transport a body, whether it's a fiery pyre or a golden bow, or the great wooden cavern. These crafts are made to carry the cargo of the soul, which have an untold weight and provide the perfect ballast. This boat of yours is carried across time with bits of eastern clay formed by the perfect hands of women 10,000 years ago, with sails made of a tapestry with 40,000 bees' wings, feathers of extinct birds, geometry of hummingbird flight, the will of a tempest, the flexing allure of clouds sweeping across the earth. Your boat needs no hull. No ballast, no gunwales, no rudder, but it will carry you from pyramids to rainforest, galleries to meadows, serene beach, temples, to the place it finds you in the morning. It will take you there. Grew up in Glasgow, Scotland. And they said a lot of things that I think influenced me. But anyways, let me just, so, you know, they wouldn't say like, fuck off. My parents would never say that anyways, but they would say, away and bow your head, which means go boil your head, you know. And they wouldn't say things like, you're full of shit, but they would say instead, "Ak your face in a tinny," or, you know, which means your face is in a tin cup. It means you're full of shit, whatever. Or just for short, they would just say, "Ak your face," you know. And as Tish knows, they would also say, you know, "Off to Jabuff," which means whatever. Except I always take it as a magical, mysterious place to go. But for me, it's you know, it's not about, it's about what words can do, and what about the motion of words that create an action and don't come to a static point. I think poetry that's static, and we've all heard that, isn't interesting. And so what happens is that for me, hearing those kinds of things creates an action within words, creates emotion, and makes it exciting. This poem has nothing to do with what I just said. But it is about my dad. So there it is. My dad. Smoked lark cigarettes, lit with a Zippo's blue flame. The first smoke, dense blue off the cigarette's tip. I can smell the butane. He's reading the opinion page of the Detroit Free Press. Squarely folded paper into a tight column, lips clenched, mouth straight, clears his throat, licks his lips, refolds the paper. "Sadie, listen to this." His jaw drops like a drawbridge. His baritone voice raises banners held tight by tendons in his neck. Prominent, his voice gets to fever pitch, compassionating current injustices, reaching to articulate what must be. I too can go there so easily, and I have. But now my fever pitches to currents of air, through grasses of light, to currents of ancestral water, where trout and other muses pull me below the surface. This is called Collegiate Ants. We are visiting our daughter at college. Not only are the three women in this household domestic anarchists, there are millions of ants, or 7 billion, I don't know. But tomorrow will be gone. Their laundry will still be in effigy heaps. The food still cemented to pans, annealed to plates, teetering in uncertain pyramids near what might be a sink. But they are young, ambitious, athletic, and smart. We are middle-aged, impatient, with their unabashed filth, recoiling at every turn. Yet we fill the refrigerator and the pantry, leave love and food, play a song, write a poem, return like homing pigeons to the roost we love so well. I find that I start writing a poem about rivers, loving rivers, and the next thing I know, it's a call to resistance. So I think it's good. I think that poets need to, feel the current of injustice. They need to metabolize it, and it should come out in their art in one way or another. So this next poem is an ekphrastic poem. I was invited to read an ekphrastic poem, and if you don't know what that is, I didn't either, actually. It means writing about a work of art. So So this is called the Cabal, which is, anyways, the piece of art. It was a art of the book. So instead of Patti Smith is a good example. All right, so instead of the book that was in this art exhibit, instead of it being bound on one side, it was actually bound on both sides. Right? So it was called Arcanum. Patty, up with your back. Anyway, so this is called Cabal, meaning, in this context, meaning like people who have a secret agenda to do nasty things. The Cabal. Here, stop. You are not allowed to enter. For all your actions, you get no verb. At the door that will not open, beside a window with no view. It is not words left unsaid. It's not truth intentionally blinded. Not the tongue snipped before. No lips unloosened from a blacked out letter. No letter to let you spell what compels you. Desist the door's deadbolt. Become unhinged. Now, ramrod the skull's thick timber, held in haughty heights. Tumble the wall. Rip open the sun-denied pages. Each of us, a leaf, winking, straining to be heard. Called Explosion. When we consider hysteria, we go inside. Unlike detonation, ever expanding like our universe, either way there is collateral damage. A limb ripped from our psyche, the quiet death of idealism, or the body parts we hold dear, no longer us. If we manage a slim escape and limp on in the greasy fog, the rattled quake like dried leaves, fall at the hint of disturbing air. Those of us who watch from our personal devices, slightly ashamed of our isolation, cry a little, wonder at the dirty fingernails who pick scabs that invoke the young and angry to acts of terror. Quietly, we strive to invoke a spirit, a salve, to quell these caustic times. In a weird, nearly hallucinogenic space, as you might gather from some of my imagery, but you know, I can see a mouse run across a path, and if I'm whacked out enough, I think it's like a wild boar or something. Anyways, this is a true story about a Mylar balloon and my encounter. All right. At that point in the morning, I was running over, through, and around hills, legs singing a favorite song. I was rising through a fennel forest, home to jackrabbits, daring squirrels, the occasional snake invoking primal fear. Alligator lizards do head jives and wink at my passing. The goosey throttle of pheasants italicize the tender cracks of the dried fennel. The shadow of a circling turkey buzzard crosses my path. I climb near the top of a hill over the Carquinez Strait. Up the crag appears a partially deflated happy face Mylar balloon. Its face cracking an ironic smile, swaying north and south, sweeping without a tether. It comes to the crest, as I do. My hand outstretched, I clench it, briefly. Its big smile smiling at me. I release it to let us continue upon an altered course. The sun says noon. The run, lungs stinging, thighs singing. The light, patchy green and bright, appears to always grow, revealing more as we go. But some stop or are taken from the course unexpectedly. We miss the sound of their breath, the rhythmic footfall we know so well, still moves us. I don't know how my friend is. Called timbre. There's a chair missing, a cloud out of place. One less bird in the evening chorus. A bare rectangle where once hung a portrait. There's an extra place setting that we want to fill. The timbre of a wine glass not clinked. An erasure of curious, deep eyes. An absence of laughter we so much need to hear. Blackbird. The day was golden, the sky sapphire. A shadow crossed her path. The winged wheeze of a passing blackbird. It dropped in mid-flight and fell into the undergrowth. Hildegard lifted the bird, its body softly quaking. She looked into the bird's eyes. She saw waves of what the bird saw. She saw her first flight, landing on a birch log at the edge of a swamp. Orange dragonflies drawing aerial geometry. Cicadas winding a tight clock. She pulled a bud out of the birch bark. A frog stirred the surface of the green water. Then the picture changed, and she saw the bird's first clutch of young, landing on a blossoming blackberry bramble. A falcon fell like a dark angel, and to her horror, snatched a chick and flew off. Her body quaked as she held Hildegard's gaze. Now it was morning, and the blackbird dipped her beak into a fingered trickle of cool water, worried a wee slug from under a blue stone, flew above the forest canopy to see the curve of the earth. She felt lighter as she traveled, slowly coming closer to the land below. And she saw, near a bend in the river, a small woman, radiant in the verdant grasses. She no longer knew how to fly, and fell close to the woman, who picked her up, and now gently returning her to rich black earth. It's called a toast. So, like speaking of like after, EJ Fair's over there, they have beer. So we're gonna go over there and have a beer after this. And you're also welcome to buy books, because I have books. But first, a toast. A toast. Let us raise our glasses to the vulgar tyrants, the oppressors, the avaricious bankers who bare their wicked teeth. Yes, let us raise our glasses to those who deny gravity and live on the flat earth of their medieval morality. Let us drink to those who have given birth to the resistors, to the buds that unfurl before our eyes, to the children who will inherit a new dawn. Mahogany, ochre, chocolate, charcoal, cream, ivory, freckled, sienna, green eyes, black eyes, brown eyes, blue, every voice in every language, arm in arm, dancing around this rising fire. May the flames do their good work. Let us clink our glasses, toss back amber liquid, smash them into the fireplace. Let the glass explode into a million tiny shards that spread into a new constellation across the night sky. I just got out of my daily crow meeting. We met in a spruce tree in the middle of the lawn outside of the library. We covered first the unexpected grim topics spawned by the hooligan task force, Each new horror was accompanied by several seconds of a squawking sonnet. Sunbirds flapping to a new branch, reciting in the din. And then we moved on to tales of mischief, humor, the odd poem, and the shape of clouds. It ended in mirth and hope as we all blew off. So I do have books for sale if you want to buy a book. If not, come have a beer. Both ways, either way. So, anyways, thank you again.